Hallo und herzlich willkommen beim PizzaSeminar, dem zweiten in dieser Woche. Nur, dass es beim ersten keine Pizza gab, sondern etwas aufwendigeres Essen. Diesmal mal wieder in unseren Gefilden in Potsdam, am BIX direkt. Herzlich willkommen, diejenigen, die hier sind und jetzt Pizza essen. Angesichts des Wetters habe ich auch noch Eis besorgt. Tut mir leid für all jene, die jetzt digital dabei sind. Ja, wir haben diesmal einen, ich will gar nicht sagen Gast, das stimmt ja nicht, denn Ransom Ngenge ist seit 4 Monaten Visiting Fellow am BIX. Er kommt ursprünglich aus Kamerun, hat dort Politikwissenschaften studiert und ist dann nach Bergen gegangen für ein weiteres Studium und für sein Masterstudium und promoviert jetzt an der Pädagogischen Hochschule in Krakau. Und er hat angefangen, Deutsch zu lernen. However, I will switch into English now. I think that makes things for at least for you much easier, and for maybe some of you out there to understand him better. So Ransom has been with BIX for the last 4 months as a visiting fellow. You will move on for another fellowship after a quick summer school break, if you will, to the United States, to the University of Pittsburgh. And his specialty, his focus in his research is cybersecurity. And for the last 4 months, you have been concentrating your work on what's called cyber embassies. And you will explain to us a little bit the concept. And then later on, discuss cybersecurity and economic diplomacy, the role of data embassies in promoting trade and investment in Germany. So it was, I say this now, and I will say this again later, it was fun having you here at BIX. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your talk. Maybe you give us 1 minute for me to get around and grab a pizza. Okay. We will leave you some for after your talk, so don't worry.
You can eat everything.
Ransom, go ahead. Maybe I just take this out.
So good morning and good day, good afternoon to everyone. This is probably a topic that is actually still in the making for a majority of researchers and for a majority of countries. And I think that when you live in an information society like Germany, then you realize that it is very important to protect people's data. It is very important to make sure that when information is transmitted online, the information has to be secure. The information has to be transmitted in the best possible way that it cannot be taken advantage of by cyber criminals. And there are so many scenarios that you can actually, like if you want to even talk about what is happening, for example, for a start, what is happening in Ukraine today, you realize that they have had a lot of issues relating to cyber attacks. And when this has to do with public information, citizens' information, it becomes a very big issue. So today, we're actually going to discuss about cybersecurity and economic diplomacy. And we're specifically going to be looking at the role that data embassies can actually play in promoting trade and investment in Germany. For Germany, it's a new concept because this is not something that is applicable yet, but we don't know. Maybe Germany is planning to maybe to set up data embassies or to even host data embassies from other countries. So today we're going to first of all look at some of the prerequisites that for data embassies to actually exist, you need to have them. That is to find yourself in an information society. And we're going to look at this from the perspective of e-government in Germany, which is not the best in the EU, but it's improving. And I think it is going to continue to improve. And we're also going to look at the state of IT security in Germany. This is important because it is going to show the necessity for a data embassy to either be established in the context of Germany, or even for Germany to act as a host for data embassies from other countries. And the essence of data embassies revolve around the idea of digital continuity. And we're also going to look more into digital continuity to see how it is relevant to the idea of data embassies. And we're going to now dive into the concept of data embassy itself to see some of things that are supposed to be put in place if in case a country wants to set up a data embassy. And for the past decade, that is since this idea started developing, especially in a country like Estonia, Luxembourg has been so attractive. And today, Estonia has a data embassy in Luxembourg, even Monaco has one. And I'm also going to discuss why that is Luxembourg is such an attractive destination for countries to establish their data embassies. And that is the sixth part of the presentation. I'm now going to talk about issues relating to the economic potentials of data embassies, especially for a country like Germany. One very aspect that we're going to look into is the fact that they usually say that data embassies are more applicable to small states. So for a big state like Germany, which is not only big in Europe, but globally, is this concept something that can actually be put into practice? And I will conclude the presentation with some of the challenges and some of the conditions or preconditions for data embassies to actually exist in the context of Germany. So to begin with, you realize that in 2013, there was the Act to promote e-government in Germany. And the Act to promote e-government in Germany had a number of obligations for both the federal, state, and local authorities to open points of access for transfer of electronic documents. And this is something that when you start thinking about the idea of transfer of electronic documents, then you have to know that these documents are transferred online. And it becomes a problem if there is no secure way of transferring these documents. And even if these documents, which has to do with public information, are transferred online, what if in the event maybe of large-scale cyber attack, or maybe any other type of emergency, or maybe even war, what is going to happen to this information? And the other very critical aspect that was also included in the Act to promote e-government in Germany is actually the idea for electronic identification, which is already very applicable in a country like Estonia, where practically 99% of public services are offered online 24/7. And for Germany, I think the electronic ID is already in practice. And you, like, if for example you go to even a supermarket to buy normally, or for someone international like myself, if I go to any local office, I'll normally have to give my card, and if they check, they see my information online and almost everything about me. And this is citizens' information, which is online. So how do you make sure at perhaps different ways of actually protecting this information so that the information doesn't fall into the hands of cyber criminals? And there has also been efforts to make sure that administrative procedures are simplified in Germany, even relating to issues like people doing their tax returns online. It's in progress, but I think it's something worth mentioning. And these are some of the very, very foundational aspects for a country to start thinking about, establishing a data embassy. So if you look at the example of electronic ID card, in the case of Germany, there are not so many things that you can do with an electronic ID card, but just the fact that you have an electronic ID card says a lot about the level of advancement that Germany has undergone in terms of digitalization. And when you have citizens, you have their information online, perhaps through this, they can also do It's not the case of Germany yet, but like in Estonia, where even voting is done online, then you begin to think about, scenarios where this information can be tampered with. We saw it in the US during the 2016 presidential elections, where Russia was accused of interfering in the US presidential elections. And these are some of the effects that come with putting information online. And states have to, step up the game to see how they can be able to protect this information. And the next slide here talks about that is doing tax returns online. And when you talk about tax returns online, it means that a lot of documentation also have to be set online. People's information have to go online, and issues also relating to like even employers, employees, even the government itself, and a lot of information is transmitted online, financial information, and this is private, is considered private and personal data. And if this information is tampered with because of the activities of cyber criminals, then it might affect the functioning of the state. Then now, we've seen how e-government makes it very important for countries to start thinking about, establishing data embassies. A country like Germany, for example. The question is, what is the state of IT security in Germany? Because to be able to assess the extent to which a country can start thinking about data embassies, then you have to consider the state of IT security in that country. And this is like statistics that fall between that is 2021 and 2022 concerning the state of IT security in Germany. And if you look at the statistic, you realize that that is 78,000 new websites were blocked from government networks because they contain malware. That is, new websites that are coming up every day are always vulnerable to cyber criminals. And the office, that is the Federal Office for Information Security, was able to block, that is 78,000 websites. That is because of the issue that they were affected by malware. And you also had what was referred to as 207 days of digital emergency in Germany. That is after ransomware attack and parental allowance, unemployment and social benefits, vehicle registration and other citizens-oriented services could not be provided just because of the activities of cyber criminals. And some of these things are happening as a result of the after effects of the war that is going on in Ukraine as a result of Russian aggression. Then in terms of the top three target groups in Germany, you have the government and administration, in other words, and you have industry and civil society. These are some of the groups that are really affected when it comes to cyber attacks in Germany. And our interest is particularly the government or the public administration, because this has to do with our information. This has to do with our private information. And if the government is not able to protect this information or to store this information in a way that the information cannot, either be leaked or the information cannot go into the hands of criminals, then it is a big problem for such a state, especially a state that is technologically advanced like Germany. And that is where we start talking about the idea of digital continuity and circumstances under which a state should actually consider, such as Germany should consider establishing data embassies. Like I mentioned earlier, because of the war in Ukraine, I think if you've been following the events that led to the war, you realize that just before the Russian aggression or the Russian invasion, a large-scale number of attacks were organized against Ukraine. And because of these attacks, a lot of institutions were affected, banking institutions, even government websites, from media, and so on and so forth. And this affects information, the flow of information. So it's not even just about protecting this information, it's also about making sure that you are able to continue to offer these citizens in such events. And there are also instances where for small states, like I said, like Monaco, like Estonia, where you can think about natural disasters. And natural disasters are very common, maybe not for Germany, but I remember we had flooding in Germany. It was 2021. Germany is a big country. It might not affect like the whole country, but if you have data centers scattered around the country, in some instances, it might affect some of these data centers, and you have to think about alternatives. You have to think about other ways on how to actually make sure that this information is not affected. And you now have cybersecurity as a solution. So the very first solution would be for you to make sure that cybersecurity is enhanced. Like last month, we had the national security strategy that is actually the first for Germany, and cybersecurity was emphasized, it was stressed, and we saw that the government is actually, the federal government, making promises of how they plan to give more autonomy to the Federal Office for Information Security, and how they also plan to make sure that they continue to develop the government in terms of, that is the e-services that are being offered to citizens. So when a country is thinking in this direction, then the country also has to start thinking about making sure that this information should be in good hands, should be in safe condition, and should be in places where the information cannot be tampered with. And that is where data embassies come in, because data embassies actually, that is kind of a new idea when it comes to international diplomacy, where you can consider storing your information in another country instead of maybe storing it in Germany. Then we're going to see 3 different approaches that a state or a country like Germany can actually take when it comes to thinking about establishing a data embassy. According to the Observatory of a Public, that is Sector Information or Innovation in 2017, they already said that the data embassy solution should be considered by every government, especially if the country is digitally advanced society and a small state. A small state is the concept that I find it conflicting, because I don't know the criteria that they use to say that this is only applicable to small states. Because for a big state like Germany, I think there are also circumstances where Germany can think of actually establishing data embassies. Then a solution is needed to ensure the state continuity and functionality despite of situations or emergencies which may hit local data centers. So this is a very important statement to show that it is not only Germany that is thinking about establishing data embassies. I think while I was doing research, I realized that even countries like India, they recently passed a law in the parliament attracting that is countries to come and establish data embassies in India. And I think Bahrain is doing the same. So they are looking at it from a business perspective. So they are taking advantage of what is happening to make business. And this is also something that I think that Germany should think about. Then, but that is what exactly a data embassy. So data embassies or e-embassies, so to speak, is actually an innovation in diplomatic relations that ensures the hosting of sensitive data in a friendly country, combined with guarantees of immunity. In international diplomacy, there is this saying that you don't have permanent friends, you only have permanent interests. So the criteria of saying that a country has to think about storing the information in a friendly country is something that really has to be expatiated, because you might have a friend today, like Estonia and Luxembourg, for example, but tomorrow they might fall out. And what happens in that situation? I think it would be a big problem for a country like that. So the statistics shows that so far, starting with Estonia, even though they started negotiations in 2015 and finally concluded the negotiations in 2017, so Estonia already has an e-embassy or a data embassy that is the world's very first in Luxembourg. And just 2 years ago, Monaco also established a data embassy in the same country. And these are the type of data sets that are usually stored in the data embassy, because not all, because majority of the information that is stored in the data embassy is critical information. And if you look at this, you realize that you have e-files, you have information relating to land registry, like land ownership and things like that, treasury information, finances, and also issues relating to the state gazette and population registry. These are all very critical information for a state. And if you have to consider that, okay, if this information is attacked perhaps in Germany, then you should have even a live copy or copies of this information in a so-called friendly state, that you're sure that you can continue to offer the services to the citizens, or you can even just have the information for protection's sake. Then to be able to establish data embassies, there are normally preconditions that a state would have to consider. And the very first thing is that a state could take into consideration cloud solutions. That is not only, first of all, establishing a data embassy in a friendly state, but what about conditions within the state? That is the first condition. So a state has to think about the fact that they would have to also have data centers within their own countries. And this is very, very important because it involves working together with the private sector. It's always the case that most of these services are not always provided by the state, but they usually outsource it. And even when we talk about IT, we talk about information security, I think the private sector offer these services, but the state have to, buy these services in most circumstances from the private sector. So in this situation, the state and the private sector would have to work in synergy to make sure that this can actually work. Then the second circumstance would actually be a situation where a state can decide to maybe work with a public cloud. I think in Germany, there are public companies that provide public cloud services. But the popular ones that we know globally are Amazon, Microsoft Azure, for example. But in Germany, we have 1&1. I'm not very sure if my pronunciation is correct, but this is a company that provides public cloud services. So Germany is actually also very advanced in terms of things like this. So they might not need to buy these services from a company that is located in the US, because they already also have multinationals in Germany that are providing these services. And if that is the type of information that is stored in public cloud would not be the critical information that should be stored in a data embassy. If you want to take, that is the example from Estonia, you realize that the type of information that is stored in public cloud is what they refer to as digital monuments. And digital monuments is information that, like, for example, the president's website. Usually there is no very critical information that is stored in this type of a website, or even the ministry that is responsible for tourism. There's no kind of critical information that is stored, and even the defense ministry, but these ministries are usually considered very strategic. And even if you want to store this type of information in public cloud, you have to understand that in the case of data leak, this might affect the reputation of the country, because people are going to be thinking about the fact that, okay, if Germany cannot be able to protect information, that is the information from the Ministry of Defense or information from the Vice Chancellor's office, then it's actually a big problem. Now, if that is the third option, would now be to establish data embassies. There are two scenarios here, because Germany might decide, Germany already has embassies abroad, and Germany might decide that, okay, if they wanted to open a data embassy in Luxembourg, they could just go to the German embassy in Luxembourg, maybe allocate a space within the embassy where they can set up, okay, this is this section is for the data embassy, it's classified, information is going to be stored here, set up the data center. But the problem with such a solution is that an embassy is not established in a way that it can, be able to guarantee the security that is needed for a data embassy. So the way the embassy is established is different. And the embassy will not also have the manpower, they will not also have the people who have the skills, the skills to actually make sure that they can protect the data center or the center when there are cyber attacks or any other physical problems. So in that case, the state or Germany could consider to use, that is, government-operated data centers of Luxembourg, for example. But the question is, if Germany decides to use data-operated centers that are owned by the government of Luxembourg, what are the guarantees that this information is still going to be not only considered as information of the German state, but make sure that this information is not tampered with, make sure that this information is immune, like we say in international diplomacy, immunity. Can they guarantee? Because when you talk about, giving information or storing information in data centers that are operated by another country, then I think there should be a high level of trust, which I think is something that you cannot guarantee in international politics. So that would be the third option, which is the basis of a data embassy. Now, to go back to the idea of cloud solutions located within the German or German's national borders, the first thing that Germany would have to do to make sure that they can progress with the idea of one day establishing a data embassy would actually be to make sure that they have sufficient data centers and heat and power plants within Germany. I am not sure if this is the case, but checking the statistics, I realized that there are more than 230 data centers in Germany owned by private companies. I don't know the statistics for those that are owned by the federal government or the states or the municipalities, but like I said before, most of these services are usually offered by these private companies to the state. And the next thing that Germany would have to do would have to be to make sure that there are actually primary and secondary data sites. The idea of having primary and secondary data sites is because information is usually transmitted between public and private sectors. And how do you make sure that if this information is being transmitted, the information cannot be tampered with? And to also ensure that the management of cloud computing resources are sufficiently flexible. That is making sure that there is a room for collaboration, there is room for synergy between the government, the federal government, and for a big country like Germany, which is even a federal state, you have states, you have municipalities, you have the private sector. So you have to think about a solution that is going to accommodate all these actors. Now, this is actually an example taken from the Estonian government cloud concept. And if you look at this, you realize that you have, on the one hand, the primary data center, and on the other hand, you have a secondary data center, which is operated by the government. And you have what they call in Estonia the X road, which is used for secure transfer of information between the public and private sectors. And for a state like Germany, I think the variables are going to be more, because you don't just have, it's not like you have just the federal government, but like I mentioned earlier, you have federated states. So it would have to be something that perhaps you might have primary and secondary data centers, not just at the level of the federal government, but also at the level of the states before you can even start thinking about private data centers. So, but Germany would have to make sure that they have a solution on how to transmit information between these data centers such that the information cannot be tampered with. Then the use of international public clouds, which I already mentioned. Here it's actually talking about the fact that countries, even like Estonia, still sometimes prefer to use international public clouds in circumstances where they think that this information is not very sensitive. Like I said, digital monuments, Ministry of Defense, they have information on their website, but this information is not sensitive information. They also, like the president's or the vice chancellor's website, they might have information on their website, but it is not considered like a critical infrastructure. And the reason for using international public cloud services like 1&1 or I think Telecom in Germany is also providing such services is because of flexibility and resource management and cost. Because sometimes if the federal government says that, or the states, the landers, if they say that they are going to start putting up this infrastructure by themselves, they might not be able to do it. It might cost a fortune, and they prefer to to buy these services from the private sector. That is by using public cloud services. But like I said, Germany is a big country, very technologically advanced, and there are already companies in Germany that are providing cloud services. So would it make sense to say that Germany should go to Microsoft, for example, to Amazon, to get this type of services? I think the answer is no. So for me, I think the best way would be to use companies in Germany that are providing these services. And if you look at this, this is practically how information is distributed when it comes to public cloud. And like I said, this might not be applicable in the context of Germany, because if Germany is using companies that are providing public cloud services that are German companies, I don't think that it would be practical in the context of Germany to say that the information would be, maybe in, I don't know if Ant has branches all over the world, but it would be a little bit different for Germany. And this is in the context of Estonia, as you can see, how they've been storing some of their information with Amazon Web Services, with Windows Azure, and so on. But for Germany, I think it would really be a little bit different, which is still something that has to be talked about and perhaps practicalized. Then the use of data embassies, like I said earlier, there are two scenarios. The first scenario would be using embassies which are already established, or using government operated data centers. I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm just going to show a sample of that is a network of data embassies. So if Germany were to establish data embassies, I don't know if they already have plans to establish one in Luxembourg, then they will normally have one in Luxembourg. We know that in the EU, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, which is very effective and which is very strict when it comes to data protection. So Luxembourg, I will discuss this in detail, but it's very attractive and it has very good qualities when it comes to data protection and advancement in information technology. So this would be like an example, perhaps. But for a big country like Germany, Germany has friends, but at the same time, it has enemies. So think about establishing a data embassy in Taiwan. Would that be something that Germany can actually think about, because you have the neighboring country, which is China? And what if in the event of war, something happens? I think the first thing that China would think about would be to go to Taiwan and take over the information. And what are some of the advantages of using data embassies? We've already discussed that data embassies are actually very promising for, that is, countries that are technologically advanced, or countries that offer citizens all their services to citizens almost online. And the fact that you have a secure facility, it's very important, because it's not like having a section in a physical embassy or in an already established embassy that is existing, where you're going to say that, okay, the servers and everything are going to be stored here and so on, coding system and so on. But it's about having this information in a secure facility elsewhere, where only people who are authorized to have access to this facility can actually go there. And the other thing is that if you have a bilateral agreement, like in the case of Estonia and Luxembourg, then you have the necessary hardware and the network that is required for a data embassy to actually operate. But I was asking myself about, okay, what if even it's not like Luxembourg is not vulnerable to cyber attacks? So what if Luxembourg is also affected by cyber attacks? What happens to the information that is stored in some of these data centers, and how is that going to affect the agreement between Luxembourg and Estonia? And the fact that for data embassies, you have that is trained specialists who are there to maintain the physical infrastructure, who are there to maintain the software infrastructure. And this is like a real embassy. The only difference is that it is an embassy without an ambassador. Then I already spoke about the fact that Luxembourg, especially in the context of the EU, is actually very, very favorite destination for data embassies. The first two countries that have established data embassies so far, you have Estonia, you have Monaco, 2021. They all choose Luxembourg. And even for Monaco, that is a bit close, but they've been able to respect the 150 kilometer radius, because there is this idea that if you want to establish a data embassy, I know Germany is close to Luxembourg. You have to make sure that the distance between the country and the country where you want to establish a data embassy, or where the data embassy is located, is at least 150 kilometers. I don't know on what basis such a distance is calculated. But for Luxembourg, some of the factors that have actually made Luxembourg a very favorite destination for countries that are thinking about establishing data embassies are, first, you have human capital. In Luxembourg, almost everyone has basic digital skills, and there are a lot of IT specialists, not just people from Luxembourg, but people from all around the world who are flocking into Luxembourg. And you have a lot of people who are also enrolled in the IT sector, graduating from the IT sector, which means that the human capital is there to be able to offer the protection that is needed. So, because when you start thinking about, okay, why am I going to this country? You start thinking about, do you have the human capital? Do you have the human resources that are needed, if in case you have to hire people to build this infrastructure, to maintain this infrastructure? And Luxembourg is one of the very promising countries when it comes to that within the EU. And they rank that is sit on the DESI, that is the, I think, European Information Security Index or something like that. Then you have issues relating to connectivity, and in Luxembourg they're very far ahead of other EU countries when it comes to broadband coverage, when it comes to G4 coverage, and when it even comes to G5 readiness. So they are already making sure that these things are ingrained in the society, and they are making sure that they use this as an opportunity to give other countries the market, or to make a market for themselves, such that countries can think about establishing data embassies in their country. Then integration of digital technology. They've also done that a lot in their e-commerce, cloud, big data, which are integrated not just in the private sector, but equally in the public sector. And there is the subject of digital public services, where they rank 11, and e-government users, digital public services for business and open data are very common in Luxembourg. And also the fact that Luxembourg, that one is a basic fact. Luxembourg is in the EU, and the EU, I mentioned the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which is like I would say globally is very well recognized, is very well respected, and when it comes to data protection. And Luxembourg is also open. Unlike so many other countries, Luxembourg is a bit open to working with other countries when it comes to the idea, because you have to embrace, you have to be open, you have to embrace the idea of data embassies before you can actually think about hosting them. Because when you say it's a business opportunity, even though from the statistics it shows that Estonia is paying approximately, that is 200 to 300,000 euros every year for data embassies, to maintain the data embassy in Luxembourg. It doesn't mean that you just have to embrace this, because you have to think about, okay, what if something goes wrong? What are the consequences that are going to apply to Luxembourg itself? And Luxembourg is also known for hosting a lot of EU institutions. So if you think about a country that hosts EU institutions, then you should think about, okay, this is a safe place, this is where I can go. Then I already mentioned the value of the GDPR, but to expatiate, you will realize that the GDPR holds a lot of great promise when it comes to data protection and data privacy and data security. And it has already been doing that. We've seen a lot of companies that especially big companies like Google, Facebook. They've been trying sometimes to even take back the data that they collect from citizens here in the EU, like to the US, but it has never been the case because with the GDPR, European data, if you are living in the EU, I think you should be very happy when it comes to issues of data privacy and data protection. And for a country to be in the EU, I think that country can be a very good market for data embassies. So Germany should think about not only establishing data embassies abroad, but also attracting other countries to establish data embassies in Germany. And GDPR to ensure that stakeholders are more proactive and respond efficiently to incidents. So there are regulations that people, like countries within the European Union, have to respect. They have to adhere to when it comes to data protection, when it comes to to responding to incidents. And usually, just the fact that these regulations are there and come with consequences of large countries to think about making sure that citizens' data are protected. So if you were to establish a data embassy in Germany, which is also part of the countries that where the GDPR applies, then you shouldn't have to worry. Or if Germany were to establish a data embassy in another EU country, that shouldn't be a problem. Then in terms of the economic potential that data embassies can actually bring to Germany, there are two options. Like I said, if Germany is planning to establish data embassies abroad, this is where Germany is going to spend money because in this situation, they would have to pay the country where they want to establish, like Luxembourg, for example, to be able to host the data centers. But Germany can also calculate, like maybe the cost of hosting a data embassy in Luxembourg might be like more than the necessity of actually establishing the data embassy. But if Germany, let's take the scenario where Germany actually planned to open a data embassy in Luxembourg, it means that this is also going to be an opportunity for job creation because you need people who are specialized not only in policy making, but people who are specialized in building the software that is needed, people who have the IT skills, people who have the knowledge of how these things work, all the infrastructure that is needed. And this is where employment comes in and revenue generation. This would be in a situation where Germany would have to be the host. I think if Germany really wanted to host data embassies, then they should think about it because countries like India and Bahrain, they've already passed laws where they are already saying that if you want to come to India and establish a data embassy, then you are very much welcome. Why? Because it's a business opportunity, because they're going to make money out of it. It's also going to be an opportunity for employment, for employment for their own citizens. So Germany should also think about not only establishing a data embassy in a friendly state, but also hosting data embassies of other countries in Germany. And I think that there is enough potential to do that. Then the other aspects that you can still talk about in terms of the potential of Germany would be the fact that it can actually enhance the reputation of Germany, because if Germany were to host data embassies, for example, you'd realize if Germany does so successfully, it would enhance the reputation of Germany as a global power, and it is also going to enhance international cooperation. And the more, just like in the case of Luxembourg, we've seen that one country took the lead, Estonia took the lead, and Monaco followed. So if, let's say, for example, Italy were to establish a data embassy in Germany, there is the possibility that based on how this information is protected, based on the long-term evaluation of how this information is protected, then other countries would normally follow, because they will see that Germany has the potential, has the capacity, has the data centers, the knowledge and everything to protect their information. And this is where I think big states can capitalize, because for small states like Estonia and Monaco, they're thinking more about protecting themselves if they're invaded. They're thinking more about protecting themselves if there is a natural disaster. They are thinking more about protecting themselves if there is a large-scale cyber attack. But for a big state like Germany, I think Germany should be thinking more in terms of actually attracting other countries, other small states to establish their own data embassies in Germany. Now you have conditions for success, which I already mentioned from the very beginning. And this is more like a summary of what we discussed, where you have to be technologically advanced, you have to be an information society. I strongly believe that from the national security strategy that we had last month, Germany is also going to continue to digitalize, not only in terms of digitalization as a whole, but also specifically with the public sector and in terms of providing services to citizens. And we might also have a day where almost everything, almost every public service is provided to citizens in Germany through online services. And in such circumstances, there is the necessity for the country to think about digital continuity, which becomes very crucial. Then I think I'll just go to the last slide, which talks about some of the things that I already mentioned, especially the fact that in international politics, you don't have permanent friends. So when you talk about a friendly state, you can have a friend today and tomorrow that friend can become an enemy. So I am not very sure how this has been addressed, because I read an article which spoke about the applicability of the Vienna Convention on Consular and Diplomatic Relations to data embassies. And this was where there was actually a big problem. And the fact that, like if you have a friend today in politics, the friend can become an enemy tomorrow. Even if you have a friend that is located to closer to an enemy, it is also a problem. Then issues of guarantee, because if you are establishing a data embassy, if you are, doing this only building on trust, trust is not something that you have in politics. You cannot say that I'm going to trust Luxembourg with data of German citizens just by word of mouth, and even a piece of paper, because even if there is a bilateral agreement, there is no guarantee that in extreme circumstances, this piece of paper is going to be respected. So these are some of the challenges that I think would very much, count when it comes to the issue of data embassies for Germany. I think to be able to really contextualize data embassies in the context of Germany, it would be necessary to talk to people who are involved in the context of Germany. I think I was talking with Tim previously, and he spoke about the fact that Germany has plans perhaps to open a data embassy in Luxembourg. So it would be very interesting to talk to people at I think that should be I don't know which ministry is responsible for this. The Foreign Office, for example, to know their plans, because if they want to do this in the context of Germany, I think the same rules are not going to apply as the case of Monaco or as the case of Luxembourg. So in the meantime, this is what we have. There is room for improvement in terms of more data that has to be collected, and I think, that is needed to be able to come up with something which is more holistic and comprehensive for Germany. Thank you very much.